You clicked because the title pulled you in. The Viking couple who endured the longest winter in history. This story follows two people who stood together while their homeland froze solid for months beyond what any clan expected. Their names were Era and Halvard. Each lived through winters before, but nothing prepared them for the endless cold that locked their valley in silence. Snow piled higher than door frames. Livestock died. Neighbors fled. Entire paths vanished under frozen waves of ice. Yet this couple stayed. They stayed when food fell low. They stayed when wolves came down from the ridge. They stayed when the sky stayed gray for days at a time. And as the cold deepened past any normal winter, Era said she heard something alive inside the stillness, something that wanted them to survive when others failed. Before the longest winter reached their valley, Era and Halvard lived like any other Viking couple. They worked their fields, they shared meals with neighbors, they held each other through normal winter nights. But when the cold thickened past anything they knew, their world changed. Snow fell for weeks. Ice-sealed doors shut. The sun hid. People fled. Some never returned. Yet Era stood firm beside Halvard. She listened to every shift in the wind. She kept the fire alive through nights that stretched longer than time itself. What she sensed inside that endless winter helped the two of them survive what others believed would end their entire valley. Before we step into their long winter, take a slow breath with me. Let your shoulders fall. Let the air in your room settle. If you sit with a blanket, pull it close. If your light feels harsh, dim it so the story lands softly. Tell me where you watch from tonight. I enjoy hearing where these quiet Viking stories travel. If you want more calm tales from this time, feel free to offer a soft like or a gentle subscribe. Your voice helps shape the next story I tell. Now sit with me near the fire. Snow falls outside Ira and Halvard's longhouse. The cold deepens. Their long winter begins. Snow started early that year. Era felt it first in the air around the longhouse. The cold held a weight she did not trust. It pressed against her skin when she stepped outside before dawn. It sank into her breath. It clung to her clothes. The frost on the grass spread faster than it should. Halvard joined her at the doorway. He rubbed his hands together. It begins early. Era nodded. Earlier than I ever saw. The sky above them stayed pale. No warmth reached through. The first flakes drifted in a thin line. They fell with a slow rhythm that felt steady and sure. Winter made its first mark without rushing. Era watched the flakes land on Halvard's beard. He smiled at her, but the smile held unease under it. We have food, we have wood, we have you and me. We stand through any winter. She stepped close and touched his arm. We stand. They walked toward their storehouse together. The fire, chickens huddled near the wall. The goats bleated inside their shelter. Frost clung to the corners of every plank and beam. Halvard checked the locks. Era checked the feed. They worked with quiet focus, the same way they did every first snow. But something in the air felt heavy. By midday, snow thickened. The flakes no longer drifted in slow lines. They fell in dense waves. Era looked toward the ridge. The trees blurred behind the white curtain. Halvard stacked split wood beside the door. He paused more than once to look up at the sky. Storm? He asked. Era shook her head. No, the wind is too still. The snow did not fall from a storm. It fell from silence. Halvard drew in a breath. We store more before night. They hauled in bundles of wood. They set baskets of dried fish near the back wall. Era placed jars of barley on a shelf. Halvard brought in the last sheepskins. When evening came, The snow had reached halfway up the door frame. Ira closed the door tight. She placed one of the long wooden bars across it, not for safety, but for strength. Halvard fed the fire. "We stay inside tonight." Ira sat across from him. "We have no choice." The walls creaked softly as snow pressed against them. The sound was not harsh. It was steady. It grew inch by inch as the snow kept building. Ira stirred the small pot on the fire. The steam rose slow. The scent of herbs drifted through the longhouse. Halvard watched her with quiet eyes. "You feel something," he said. Ira continued stirring. "Yes." His voice lowered. "What is it?" "The winter feels longer than it should." Halvard frowned. "It is one early snowfall." Ira shook her head. "No, it is something more. The cold feels deeper." Halvard walked over and sat beside her. He placed an arm around her back. "We saw harsh winters before." Ira rested her head against his shoulder. "This one feels older." He kissed the top of her head. "We stand through it. You said so." She closed her eyes. "I know." Night settled fast. Snow pressed harder against the longhouse. The wind stayed low, almost held back by the weight of the cold. The fire gave warmth, but not enough to lift the unease. Ira lay beside Halvard under their furs. His breath stayed steady. Hers did too, but her heart beat with a slow, careful rhythm. She listened to the soft push of snow outside. The weight on the roof grew heavier. Halvard pulled her closer. "Sleep," Ira whispered. "It starts tonight." In the morning, Halvard struggled to open the door. Snow poured in as soon as he forced the frame outward. It fell in a thick wall that reached his waist. He pushed more aside. Ira joined him, scooping snow with her arms. When they stepped outside, a chill hit them strong enough to tighten their lungs. The entire valley sat under a thick, white blanket. Every roof carried a heavy load. The paths vanished. The fields hid under deep frost. Halvard whistled under his breath. "Fell all night." Ira pointed to the ridge. "Look!" The ridge almost disappeared. Only the tops of the highest pines stood above the storm's reach. Halvard's jaw tightened. "We dig paths. We check the neighbors." Ira nodded. "We start with the Sigrid family." They carved a narrow trail through the snow toward the next longhouse. It took them half an hour to reach a place that normally took 5 minutes. Their legs burned, their hands chilled through their gloves. The Sigrid longhouse door sat buried. Halvard dug it out with strong pulls of his arms. When the door finally opened, 4 faces peeked through the crack. Sigrid stepped forward. "Bless you two. We stayed trapped." Halvard nodded. "We check each house." Sigrid's husband stepped out behind her. "The cold deepens fast." Ira looked inside their longhouse. Smoke rose from the fire. The children huddled under furs. Their faces looked tired. "We bring wood later," Ira said. "Keep the fire strong." Sigrid touched her arm. "You always know when to help." Ira did not respond. She only nodded. Halvard and Ira continued through the valley. Every home needed help. Every path needed clearing. Every family had someone who looked at the sky with quiet fear. By the time they reached their own longhouse again, the sun hung low in the sky. Ira brushed snow off her sleeves. Halvard stomped the snow off his boots. Inside, the longhouse felt warm again. Halvard closed the door and dropped onto a bench. "We help the last homes tomorrow," he said. Ira nodded and sat beside him. She warmed her hands by the fire. The wood crackled. The flames danced low. Halvard looked at her carefully. "Tell me what you sense." Ira stared at the fire. "The cold moves inward. It does not stay in the air. It settles into earth and wood." Halvard frowned. Cold always settles. Not like this, Era said. This winter digs into the ground. It spreads deep. Halvard rested his hands on his knees. So we prepare. We hold through it. Era turned her head toward him. It lasts longer than a normal winter. How long? She listened to the silence. Long enough to test us. Halvard breathed slow. Then we face it together. Era touched his arm. Always. That night, the cold thickened again. Frost spread across the beams inside the longhouse. Halvard added more wood to the fire. Era wrapped layers around their bed. Near midnight, Era woke to a strange sound. A soft crack. Not from the roof, not from the walls. It came from deep below the ground. She sat up fast. Halvard blinked awake. What? Era listened. The sound came again. A low, slow crack from frozen earth. Halvard sat up. What is that? The ground freezes deeper, Era whispered. Halvard rubbed his face. Ground always freezes. Era shook her head. Never that deep. The crack echoed through the floor again. Halvard swung his legs over the side of the bed. We check outside. Era grabbed his wrist. Wait. He stopped. She looked at him with steady eyes. We check at dawn. The cold grips harder at night. He nodded. Dawn, then. They lay back down. Halvard rested his arm over her. Era stared at the wooden beams above them until her eyes grew heavy again. Morning brought no warmth. They stepped outside, and the air bit at their cheeks. The snow rose up past their knees. The sky stayed a dull shade of gray. Not storm gray, lifeless gray. Era knelt and placed her hand on the snow. The cold traveled up her arm fast. She pulled back. Halvard looked at her. What do you feel? The earth rests under a weight, she said, and something inside it waits. Halvard frowned. Waits for what? Era stood. To see if we hold through this. Halvard placed his hand on her shoulder. We will. She nodded. We must. They checked the ridge next. Snow rose high against the trees. Some branches snapped. Others hung low under frost. Halvard tested the stability of the ridge path. Era scanned the tree line. The world felt silent. Even birds stayed still. Halvard compared the thickness of snow with his hand. I never saw this depth in early winter. Era watched the sky. This is not early winter. This is a different winter. Halvard breathed out slow. A long one. They worked through the day. They shoveled snow off the roof. They cleared the entry. They brought more wood inside. They checked on neighbors again. Every trip took longer than the one before. By late afternoon, Era felt a strange pressure in her chest. A heavy stillness. She stopped in the snow and placed a hand against her ribs. Halvard hurried to her side. What is it? Era swallowed. The air slows. Halvard looked around. The wind feels dead. Era nodded. No movement, no flow. Halvard scanned the ridge. Storm coming? Era shook her head. No storm, only cold. They returned home before sunset. The longhouse felt smaller under the weight of the cold outside. Halvard fed the fire until the flames reached higher. Era hung extra blankets along the walls to trap heat. As night fell, the deep winter settled in stronger than before. Halvard lay beside her. We stay ahead of it. Era closed her eyes. We try. Halvard pulled her close. We do more than try. She placed a hand on his chest. We endure. Outside, the snow piled higher. The stillness grew thicker. The valley slept under the first stage of a winter no Viking had seen for generations. Inside the longhouse, Era felt something settle inside her mind. A voice of calm, a voice of warning, a voice that told her the hardest days had not started yet. The second week of winter brought a silence the valley never heard before. Era stood outside the longhouse before dawn and waited for the wind. None came. The air hung still. The frost stood sharp on every surface. Her breath drifted out and froze in small crystals that clung to her scarf. Halvard joined her, pulling his cloak tight. The stillness thickens. Era nodded. The air feels heavy. He looked toward the ridge. No tracks from animals. Even wolves hide. Era stepped forward and pressed her foot into the snow. It held firm, almost solid. Ice layered under the snow in thick sheets. The cold penetrated deeper each day. Halvard reached down and dug through the snow with his hand. Beneath it, he found a smooth, frozen layer, thick as a plank. "I never saw this," he said. Era touched the ice. It felt old, heavy. "This winter freezes from below." Halvard stood. "We need more wood before the cold settles worse." They spent the morning dragging wood from their storehouse to their longhouse. Each load felt heavier than the last. The cold slowed their hands. Their breath thickened in the air. Halvard's fingers grew stiff. Era's feet felt numb through her boots. As they worked, snow fell again. Not in flakes, but in a steady curtain of powder. It drifted down with the same silent calm that marked the early days of this winter. Halvard stacked logs beside the door. "The sky hides without storm." Era looked up. The clouds sat in one smooth layer across the sky. No movement, no shape. "It is not a storm, it is a long breath." Halvard raised his brow. "From the cold?" Era nodded. By midday, they dug another path toward the closest neighbors. The snow reached their waists, their steps sunk deep. Every movement took strength. Halvard carved a narrow trail. Era followed with steady balance. The Sigurd family waited by their door. Their fire smoked through the roof hole. Their clothes looked layered thick. Sigurd stepped out. "Era, Halvard, thank the gods you came." Era touched her arm. "How are the children?" Sigurd pointed inside. "Tired. Cold grips them faster each night." Era looked at Halvard. He nodded. "We bring more wood soon." Sigurd's husband walked out. His face looked pale. "The goats struggle." Halvard frowned. "Struggle how?" "The cold freezes the water buckets. The feed freezes too." Era looked toward the small shelter near their longhouse. "We help thaw it." Halvard and Era followed him. The goat shed shook slightly in the cold. Frost coated the roof thick. Inside, the goats huddled in a tight cluster. Their breath steamed, but the air stayed sharp. Ira knelt and placed her hands on the frozen bucket. Her fingers burned. Halvar broke the ice with a metal tool. He chipped it clean, then filled it with warm water from a pot Sigrid brought out. The goats rushed forward, drinking fast. Sigrid watched them with worry. Winter never struck so fast. Ira stood. "We stand together. We check on you tomorrow." Sigrid nodded. "Bless you both." The walk home drained them. Snow reached higher. The cold reached deeper. Halvard's beard gathered frost. Ira's cloak stiffened at the edges. When they stepped back inside their longhouse, a wave of warmth hit them like a soft touch. Halvard dropped onto the bench near the fire. "This will be the longest season." Era sat beside him. "Yes." He watched her steady expression. "Tell me what you sense now." "The cold grows stronger," Era said. "It does not pass between storms. It stays." Halvard rubbed his hands over the fire. "How long?" Era shook her head. "I hear no end in the wind." Halvard let out a slow breath. "Then we prepare for months." The next morning, the air froze harder. The cold hurt their skin the moment they stepped out. Snow reached their chest in places. Halvard dug paths, while Era checked the strength of the longhouse walls. The wood held, but frost crept along every beam. Era pressed her palm against one beam. It felt brittle, too brittle. Halvard saw her face. "What?" Era whispered. "The wood holds, but only for now. If the cold deepens more," Halvard set his jaw, "we brace it." They spent the day reinforcing beams with thick ropes and extra planks. Halvard hammered pegs. Era tied supports. Their breath froze against the beams as they worked. Their fingers stung. Their backs ached. But the longhouse grew stronger. That evening, Halvard brought in more dried fish. Era boiled water for broth. They ate without speaking. The fire crackled. The walls creaked. Outside, the cold pressed in. Near midnight, a sudden crack echoed through the longhouse. Halvard shot up. "The ridge!" Era held her breath. Another crack came, deep and long, like the earth splitting. It rolled across the valley with a slow rumble. Halvard stepped outside. Ira followed. The sky glowed faintly with moonlight. The ridge sat still, but somewhere deeper in the valley, a long fissure cut through the frozen ground. They saw it as a dark line stretching between two distant homes. Halvard clenched his jaw. "The ground breaks," Era whispered. "The cold reaches the earth's bones." They walked toward the fissure. The snow around it sunk lower. The edges froze sharp. Halvard knelt and touched the ice. It froze so fast the earth split. Era knelt beside him. "This winter does not want to break. It wants to stay." Halvard stood and looked across the valley. "Then we outlast it." They returned to their longhouse. Ira warmed her hands. Halvard paced. After a long silence, he said, "We talk about leaving." Era turned her head sharply. "Leave?" Halvard nodded. "If the cold grows past what we can survive here." Era stepped closer. "Travel where? The mountains freeze faster. The coast is far. The forests hold wolves." Halvard exhaled. "I know, but staying here becomes harder. Each week," Era placed her hands on his arms. "We stay until the winter forces us, and it has not yet." Halvard held her gaze. Then he nodded. "You are right." Era touched his cheek. "We endure what comes." The next days tested them deeper. The cold thickened again. Their breath froze in the air so fast it turned into white dust. The longhouse walls frosted over fully. The fire never went out. It burned day and night. Halvard slept in short shifts. Era slept in shorter ones. They checked neighbors daily. Many struggled. A few had floors coated in frost. Some ran out of wood. Halvard hauled bundles from their own store to share. Era carried blankets. They stayed busy so fear could not root inside them. On the 7th day of deep winter, Era felt a new pressure in the air, a slow weight that wrapped around her chest. She paused near the ridge path. Halvard looked at her. "What is it?" Era listened with closed eyes. "The cold grows again, stronger than we saw yet." Halvard pointed toward the valley floor. "We go home, now." They hurried back. The wind did not blow, but the temperature dropped with shocking speed. Their hair stiffened. Their breath hurt their lungs. Era's hands burned with sharp cold. When they reached the longhouse, frost had already climbed farther up the walls. Halvard slammed the door shut. Era dropped next to the fire. Halvard knelt beside her. "What did you feel?" Era breathed slow. "The winter reached its next stage." He touched her back. "How many stages?" She shook her head. "I do not know, but this one freezes faster." Halvard fed more wood into the fire. "We stay close to the flames." Era leaned against him. "We stay close to each other." Through the night, the cold pressed in waves. Not storms, waves. Era felt each one move through the valley. She heard faint cracks from distant homes. Halvard held her hand. They stayed awake until dawn. By morning, the world outside looked frozen in place. No wind, no tracks, no sound. Even the smoke from their chimney drifted upward in a slow line that did not sway. Halvard stepped outside and felt the air press against him like a wall. "This is the longest winter," Ira nodded, "and it does not end soon." They stood together in the cold, breath thick between them. Their valley slept under the deepest winter in memory. But Ira felt something inside the stillness, not a threat, a call, a pull, a message held in the silence. She looked at Halvard. "This winter asks something from us." Halvard studied her face. "What?" Ira breathed slow. "To stay, to endure, to live through what others refuse to face." Halvard took her hand. "Then we do." She squeezed his fingers. "We do." The longest winter in history had only started tightening its grip. But Ira and Halvard stood together, steady and unbroken. The third stretch of the long winter began with a sound unlike anything Ira or Halvard ever heard. It came early in the morning, before the sun rose, when the longhouse glowed only from the fire's low embers. Ira sat up slowly, listening with careful breath. The sound drifted through the valley like distant grinding stone. Halvard woke beside her. "Again?" Ira nodded. "The ice moves." Halvard stood, grabbed his cloak, and opened the door. A wall of cold rushed in. Ira followed him. They stepped outside together. The ground below their boots felt different, harder, thicker. A sheet of ice now sat beneath the snow, far stronger than before. The cold cut into their skin as if the air itself held teeth. Ira knelt and brushed away snow. The ice beneath it had grown several inches thicker overnight, clear in places, white in others. It spread across the valley in a single solid sheet. Halvard crouched down beside her. "This cold settles deeper each night." Ira touched the ice. Her fingers stung from the contact. "The valley sinks under it." Halvard looked toward the ridge. "We check the other homes." Ira stood. "We check them fast." They carved another slow path through the frozen valley. Each step struck the ice with a blunt sound. The snow no longer gave way under their feet. Instead, it cracked into shards. They reached the first home. Smoke rose from the roof, but the door frame warped under the pressure of frost. Halvard knocked. Sigrid's husband forced the door open. His breath drifted in thick clouds. "You came early," he said, with tired eyes. Halvard nodded. "We checked the valley." Sigrid appeared behind him. Her voice shook. "The cold reaches our bones. We keep the fire strong, but it fights us." Ira stepped inside. The family huddled under blankets. Their youngest child coughed. The air inside felt thinner than before. Ira crouched beside the fire pit and studied the smoke. It rose straight up without moving sideways. No draft flowed through the longhouse. Halvard watched her. "What do you see?" Ira answered slow. "The air no longer travels. Even the smoke stands still." Sigrid's husband shivered. "How do we survive this?" Ira stood. "You stay near the fire. You use more wood than normal. You cover the walls with extra hides." Halvard stepped forward. "We bring more fuel." Sigrid placed a hand on Era's wrist. "You two hold the valley together." Era shook her head softly. "We hold each other. All of us." They left the house and moved deeper into the valley. More homes carried frost inside. A few doors froze shut. Halvard used his strength to open them. Era checked fires. She spoke calmly to families. She left instructions for keeping walls warm. Hours passed. The cold sharpened. The wind still refused to move. By midday, Halvard and Ira reached a small home on the far edge of the valley. It belonged to an older couple. The door had frozen shut from the inside. Halvard slammed his shoulder against it. The wood cracked and finally gave way. Inside, the old man sat near the fire, wrapped in furs. His wife lay beside him, trembling under blankets. Era rushed to her. "How long?" the old man swallowed. "She chilled fast last night." Era touched the woman's forehead. The chill beneath her skin felt deep, too deep. Halvard grabbed more wood from the stack and fed the fire until flames grew strong. The warmth began to build. Era whispered to the woman, "Stay awake, stay warm." The woman blinked weakly. Halvard knelt beside the old man. "We bring more wood later." The old man nodded. "Bless you." Era squeezed the woman's hand. "We return soon." When they left the longhouse, Halvard felt the weight of the cold on his chest. The air pushed against him like frozen pressure. He looked at Era. "They will not last without help." Era stared ahead. "We bring them to our home if we must." Halvard nodded. "Tonight." The walk home drained them more than any before. Their legs moved slow. Their breath grew ragged. But they kept going. Inside their longhouse, Halvard fed the fire until it roared. Ira collapsed onto the bench. Halvard sat beside her. "Tell me what you hear now." Era closed her eyes. "The winter pushes harder. It tests the valley. It tests us." Halvard took her hand. "Then we push back." Era opened her eyes. "I worry for the older ones, for the children." He nodded. "I carry them if we must." Ira looked at him with steady eyes. "You would carry the valley if it needed you." Halvard smiled lightly. "Only because you stand with me." Evening approached. Ira stirred a pot of broth. Halvard gathered thick furs from storage. The fire warmed the longhouse, but the cold pressed hard from the outside. Frost crept across the beams despite the heat. When night settled, they stepped outside again with torches. The older couple needed help fast. The ice crackled under their boots. Their torches hissed in the frozen air. Their breath stung their lungs. They reached the small longhouse and pushed inside. The older woman lay weak but conscious. Halvard gathered her in his arms. Ira helped the old man stand. He leaned on her with shaky steps. They began the slow walk back. Halfway through the valley, the air grew colder still. A sudden wave passed through the valley with silent force. Ira stopped walking for a moment. Halvard adjusted the woman in his arms. "Era," she swallowed. "The winter deepens again. This is the next stage." Halvard looked around sharply. "Move! Fast!" They hurried, forcing each step through the frozen path. The older man leaned heavily on Era, but she held firm. Halvard carried the woman with strong, steady arms. They reached their longhouse at last. Inside, the fire glowed bright. Halvard set the woman near the heat. Era sat beside her. The old man sat on a bench, breath shaking. Era touched his arm. "You stay here tonight. We keep you warm." Halvard placed layers of fur over them both. "Rest. Eat." Era placed warm broth in their hands. Their trembling slowed as they drank. The heat seeped into their bodies. Their eyes softened. Halvard wiped frost from his beard. "This winter grows worse each night." Era nodded. "We endure it. All of us." They sat near the fire as the night stretched long. The old couple slept in the warm light. The fire burned steady. Frost still crept across the walls, but it moved slower inside the heat. Near midnight, Era heard the ice shift again. A long, distant crack. She closed her eyes. Halvard watched her. "What is it?" Era answered quietly. The earth hardens more. The valley sinks deeper into cold. He leaned closer. Does it break? No, she said. Not tonight. He rested his forehead against hers. We fight through this, day after day, night after night. Era breathed in the warm air between them. We do. The next morning, they woke to see their longhouse wrapped in frost from floor to ceiling, except for the space around the fire. Era stood and walked to the door. The cold pressed against it so hard she had to push with her shoulder to open it. Outside, the valley looked frozen in time. No tracks marked the snow. No movement stirred along the ridge. The sky hung heavy and low. Halvard stepped beside her. This winter advances faster. Era nodded. Soon the cold tests our strength deeper. He looked at her. Then we prepare again today. Era turned to him. You and I stand at the center of this valley. We must not fail. Halvard placed a hand on her cheek. We never fail each other. Era felt warmth rise in her chest. Then the valley stays with us. They spent the day reinforcing their home further. Halvard added more planks to the walls. Era lined the edges with thick woven mats. They packed snow against the outer walls for extra insulation. By afternoon, their longhouse looked fortified enough to stand through a siege of ice. Halvard filled their storage with more wood. Ira dried more herbs. They brewed broth. They kept the fire alive. By evening, the older couple regained strength. Their cheeks held color again. Era helped them sit upright. Halvard said, You stay with us until this winter loosens. The old man nodded. We owe our lives to you. Era shook her head. We hold each other. That is how we survive. Night settled again. The cold pressed in harder. But the fire burned brighter in the longhouse. The air inside stayed warm. The older couple slept. Ira and Halvard sat awake. Halvard rubbed his hands over the fire. Era, what do you feel tonight? She listened. She listened long. Finally she said, This winter watches us. Halvard frowned. Watches? Era nodded. It watches who breaks. It watches who stands. It learns from us. Halvard stared into her eyes. And what does it learn? She leaned her head on his shoulder. That we endure. Together. They stayed like that long into the night, framed by firelight, pressed close, holding the warmth between them, until the winter eased, not by melting, not by breaking, but by recognizing strength. And the couple who endured the longest winter in history stood ready for what the next days would bring. The fourth stage of the long winter began without warning. Era woke before dawn. The fire still burned, but the air inside the longhouse felt colder than any night before. She sat up fast. Her breath came out as a white cloud. Frost clung to her hair. Halvard stirred beside her. His eyes opened at once. Something changed, Ira nodded. The air is thinner. They both rose and walked to the door. Halvard pushed it open. A wind rushed in. A wind no one expected. For weeks the valley held still. No breeze, no movement, no sound beyond the shifting of the ice. But now a wind swept down from the ridge. It struck their faces with sharp force. It carried snow like shards of glass. Era stepped outside and scanned the valley. The wind did not blow in one direction. It moved in circles. It twisted through the valley as if trapped inside a bowl. It spun so fast it lifted snow from the ground. Halvard covered his eyes. This wind might tear homes apart. Era narrowed her eyes. It tests the walls. The older couple inside stirred from the noise. Era shouted back into the longhouse. Stay near the fire, the woman answered with a weak voice. We stay. Halvard stared at the swirling valley. We need to check the others. Era grabbed her fur cloak. We go now. They pushed into the storm. The wind pushed back. Step by step, they moved through it. Snow struck their faces. Ice shards stung their skin. They leaned forward to keep balance. The valley looked changed. Snow swirled in pillars. The wind carved patterns across the ice. It pulled at the roofs of longhouses. It howled like something alive. They reached the first home. Sigurd's husband stood outside, holding the door shut with all his strength. Halvard rushed to help him. Together they forced the door closed and secured it with a bar. Inside, Sigrid tried to calm her children. The younger one cried softly. Ira knelt beside them. You stay low, stay close, keep blankets tight. Sigrid swallowed. This wind came so fast. Yes, Ira said. Stay near the fire. We come back. They braced the door with extra beams and stepped outside again. The wind grew stronger. Snow whipped sideways. It covered their footprints in seconds. The ridge above disappeared behind a white curtain. Halvard leaned close to Eira. We check the next homes quick. They fought their way across the valley. The next longhouse had already lost part of its roof covering. Snow blasted through the gap. Halvard climbed up the side and held the broken plank while Eira tied it back into place with rope. His fingers stiffened. Wind lashed at him, but he held steady. When he climbed down, his beard held thin shards of ice. Eira cupped his face for a moment. Stay warm, he touched her hand. Only because you stand with me. They checked another home. The wind pulled so hard against the door that Halvard needed both arms to close it. Inside, the family stayed huddled. The father thanked them through chattering teeth. Ira spoke calm words. You strengthen the fire, keep every hide raised. They continued through the valley. The storm twisted tighter. A white haze covered everything. They moved closer to each other, so the wind did not separate them. By the time they reached the far home of the fisherman's family, the door hung open. Snow piled inside. The fisherman and his 2 sons tried to push the door shut, but the wind forced it wide. Halvard stepped forward. He pushed with one shoulder and one hand. His muscles strained. His boots slid across the frozen ground. But he did not move back. Inch by inch, he forced the door against the storm. Ira rushed inside to help the fisherman secure the bar. Together, they locked it in place. Halvard stepped inside, breathing heavy. Eira looked at him. Still with me? He nodded once. Always. She touched his arm. Then the valley holds. They checked every corner of the home. The family brought their woodpile closer to the fire. Their youngest son curled under blankets near the heat. Eira said, We return later. Stay safe. They stepped outside once more. The wind hit them harder than before. They clung to each other as they crossed the valley. Snow blasted against them. Their cloaks whipped behind them. Their faces went numb. Their hands burned from the cold. Eira whispered between breaths. The wind carries ice from the ridge. Halvard nodded. It drops into the valley. It strikes every home. They reached their own longhouse at last. They stumbled inside, shaking and covered in frost. The older couple sat close to the fire. The woman looked up. Is everyone safe? Eira nodded, though her voice shook. For now. Halvard closed the door with force. The wind outside slammed against it again. Eira grabbed warm stones from near the fire and wrapped them in cloth. She placed them under her arms and against her chest. Halvard did the same. After their bodies warmed, they ate warm broth and rested near the fire. Halvard turned to her. This storm lasts the night. Eira nodded. And tests the valley again. He leaned back on the bench. Tell me what you hear. She closed her eyes. At first, she only heard wind, but then she heard the rhythm beneath it, a certain pressure, a certain direction, a certain intent. She opened her eyes. The storm circles. It does not move on. It presses us into the ground. It lowers the valley even more. Halvard stared into the fire. This winter tries to crush us. It will not, Era said. We hold each other. We hold the valley. They waited. They ate. They rested. But the wind did not settle. Hours later, the longhouse shook. Halvard stood fast. The roof! He ran up the ladder. Era followed him. Snow pushed through the highest gaps. Halvard hammered extra pegs into place. Era pressed hides into the cracks. The wind screamed outside. The walls trembled. Halvard steadied a beam that rattled in its frame. Era tied rope around it to secure it tighter. Only when the wind slowed for a brief moment did they climb down again. They collapsed near the fire once more. The older man spoke. You two do more than anyone. Era shook her head. We do what we must. Halvard's voice softened. We protect the valley as the valley protects us. Night grew deeper. The storm refused to end. Era watched the fire. She spoke in a quiet voice. Halvard. He looked at her. She continued. Do you feel the cold sink below the ground now? He listened. He nodded. Yes. Era said, soon the earth freezes so deep it reaches the roots of the forest. When that happens, animals flee. Food grows harder to find. Halvard thought about this. We hunt closer to home tomorrow. Era placed a hand on his forearm. No, tomorrow we hold the valley again. You stay near the longhouses. No one hunts in this storm. He nodded. Then we give what strength we have left. Morning came slow. The wind weakened but did not stop. Era stepped outside. Snow piled to her knees. The air swirled heavy. The ridge stayed hidden behind thick, white haze. Halvard joined her. His breath hung heavy in the air. We check the others again. Era nodded. Yes. They visited every home before midday. The wind still cut through the valley, but the worst passed. Roofs still stood. Doors still held. Children still breathed warm air near fires. But everyone looked tired. Everyone looked shaken. The storm crushed their spirit more than the cold did. When Era and Halvard returned to their longhouse, they sat near the fire together. The older couple ate warm stew. Era tended their hands, warming them with cloth and stones. As evening came, Halvard stepped outside alone. Era joined him a moment later. The wind settled to low whistling. Halvard studied the valley. We made it through the storm. Era stood beside him. This winter keeps teaching us. Halvard wrapped an arm around her shoulder. What does it teach next? She leaned into his side. Endurance, patience, strength we do not speak. He breathed slow. We have that. She looked up at him. We do. They went back inside, closed the door tight, and tended the fire. The storm would return. The cold would deepen. But so would their resolve. The storm eased, but the silence that followed did not feel safe. Ira stepped outside at dawn. The wind no longer spun through the valley. Snow did not whip in circles. The air held still, yet the stillness pressed against her skin in a way she did not trust. Halvard joined her a moment later. His boots sank deep into the fresh snow. He scanned the valley with a slow turn of his head. It rests, he said. Era shook her head. It watches. She walked forward through the snow, testing its weight. The surface felt wrong, not soft, not hardened by wind, somewhere between. A strange layer, almost hollow underfoot. Halvard knelt and brushed his hand across the surface. Ice formed over loose snow. Era nodded. The storm left it shallow. It hides gaps under the crust. Dangerous, he said. A wrong step breaks the surface. They walked carefully toward the nearest longhouse. Smoke rose weakly from its roof hole. The children inside stirred at the sound of footsteps. Sigrid opened the door. Her eyes looked worn. Her hair held streaks of frost. The storm passed. Era stepped inside. Yes, but the ground changed. Halvard pointed toward the valley floor. Stay near your home today. Do not walk alone. Sigrid nodded. Thank you. They moved on to the next homes. Everyone felt drained. Firewood piles shrank. Eyes stayed sunken. Faces carried exhaustion deeper than hunger. Halvard met Era's gaze. We need more wood. Era nodded. Yes, before the next wind. He looked toward the forest. We go there today. Era grabbed his arm. Slowly, the snow hides holes. We take rope, Halvard said. We tie ourselves together. They returned to their longhouse. Ira gathered rope, warm stones, and a small axe. Halvard strapped his larger axe to his back. The older couple inside watched them prepare. The older man spoke. You walk far? Halvard nodded. To the tree line. The older woman held out a piece of dried fish. Take this. You eat before you go. Era accepted it with a bow of her head. They stepped outside. The sun peeked through thin clouds but offered no warmth. Halvard tied the rope around his waist. Era did the same. They left enough distance between them so each had space to move around obstacles. They stepped forward. The crust broke beneath Era's first step. Her foot dropped into loose snow. She steadied herself. See? Halvard nodded. We walk slow. They moved across the valley. Each step tested the surface before committing. The rope tugged between them. It stayed their guide. When they reached the start of the forest, the trees stood silent. Branches hung heavy with ice. The air here felt different. A deeper cold lived beneath the shade. Halvard touched the bark of the nearest tree. Hard freeze. Era looked up. Branches fall easier. He lowered his hand. We stay clear of weak trunks. They searched for fallen wood first. Branches littered the ground from earlier storms. Ira gathered small limbs. Halvard cracked thicker ones against tree roots to break them down. Each sound echoed in the still forest. No birds moved, no animals stirred. Era stacked wood into a bundle. This helps a few days. Halvard tightened the rope around his waist. We take more. They moved deeper into the trees. Snow broke underfoot with each step. Halvard lifted a long trunk that had snapped near its base. It weighed heavy, but he lifted it onto one shoulder. Ira watched his legs sink deeper into the snow. You carry too much. Halvard shook his head. We need it. She stepped to his side and lifted part of the weight. We carry it. He smiled with tired eyes. Together. They began to walk back toward the valley. Halfway out, the ground shifted. Halvard felt the crust break under him. His foot sank deep. He lost balance and fell forward, dropping the trunk. The rope pulled tight. Ira anchored herself. Hold still. Halvard let out a slow breath. Snow swallowed my leg. Era reached him and brushed snow away with both hands. She freed his leg inch by inch. His boot stuck, frozen in place. She dug until she reached the leather. Halvard braced himself on one knee. Era pulled. The boot came free. He stood again. The ground weakens, she nodded. We leave fast. They reached the valley after long effort. The rope helped keep them steady. Snow broke beneath them, but not enough to pull them under. When they reached their longhouse, They carried the wood inside and stacked it near the fire. The older couple sighed with relief. Ira warmed her hands near the flames. Halvard sat beside her. His breath came slow. His muscles trembled from strain. She touched his arm. "You worked hard." He looked at her. "You saved me." She shook her head. "I held the rope." "And you kept me steady," Halvard said. They ate warm broth together. After resting, Era stepped outside again. The valley held a strange quiet. She walked a few steps from the door. Snow crunched under her boots. The crust dipped slightly beneath her weight. She stood still and listened. Halvard opened the door behind her. "You hear something?" Ira nodded. "The ground speaks." He closed the door and joined her. Together they listened to the valley. Under the crust, something shifted. Not animal movement, not wind. A soft settling, a slow sink. Era said, "Snow under us lost support. It slumps in places." Halvard stared at the ground. "The valley floor drops?" Era nodded. "The storm pushed too much weight down. The old layers collapse under new ones." He exhaled. "So, the valley sinks." She turned to him. "Not the land, the snow, but deep." He studied the homes around them. "People walk here every day. This becomes dangerous." Era touched his hand. "We teach them how to move. Today." They called neighbors to gather near the center of the valley. Everyone came slowly. Some leaned on sticks. Others wrapped blankets around their shoulders. Halvard spoke loud enough for all to hear. The ground changed. Snow hides gaps. You need rope when you walk far. You test each step. Era pointed toward the forest. "Do not walk alone. Snow caves under your weight." Sigrid asked. "How long does this last?" Era answered. "Until the next freeze, or the next sun. The valley waits for warmth, but warmth comes slow." The fisherman asked, "Do we dig paths?" Halvard looked toward the ridge. "We dig only near each home. Deeper paths collapse with weight." The crowd murmured. Fear rose among them. Faces grew tense. Shoulders tightened under thick layers. Ira stepped forward and raised her voice. "Listen, winter tests us, but we stand together. You watched storms break trees. You watched the cold freeze the ridge. You watched nights stretch longer than memory. You still wake each morning." The noise quieted. Era said, "This valley lives because you live in it." Halvard rested a hand on her back. Era finished, "We move slow. We move steady. We move as one." The neighbors nodded. People returned to their homes with new caution. Some tied ropes to posts outside their doors. Others stayed inside for warmth. As the sky darkened, Halvard and Ira stood together in the center of the valley. They scanned the homes, making sure smoke rose from each roof. Halvard said, "We get through today." Era nodded. "And tomorrow." They walked back to their longhouse. Inside, the older couple slept close to the fire. The flames crackled low. Era and Halvard added logs to raise the heat again. Halvard sat and rubbed his hands together. "The winter does not let go." Era lowered herself beside him. "The longest winter holds until something shifts." He turned toward her. "What shifts?" She stared into the fire. "The valley's will, our strength, or the sky." Halvard drew a slow breath. "If the sky softens, the cold breaks." She rested her hand against his. "Yes." Night settled deep. The wind outside stayed low. Era leaned her shoulder into Halvard's. His warmth mixed with hers. Their breaths aligned. He spoke in a soft voice. "Every time the valley changes, you sense it first." She kept her eyes on the fire. "I listen." He nodded. "Then tomorrow I listen with you." They sat together through the night. Hours passed. Fire burned. The cold outside crawled, but the longhouse held. The valley lived another day, and the winter prepared its next test. The sixth stage of the long winter began with a sound no one expected. A single crack, sharp, deep, from far below the snow. Era woke at once. She sat up fast and held her breath. Halvard stirred beside her. His eyes opened before she spoke. "You heard it," he said. Era nodded. Something split. They both rose. The fire still burned. The older couple stirred, but did not wake. Era stepped to the door and opened it slow. Cold air slid inside. Halvard joined her. The valley lay still under a faint gray sky. No wind, no drifting snow. But something felt different. The surface of the valley floor looked smoother, lighter, as if the weight settled lower than the day before. Halvard studied it. A deep crack under the snow? Era stepped outside and listened. She stood perfectly still. The cold pressed against her face. Frost clung to her cloak. But she ignored the discomfort. She closed her eyes. There. A faint echo. A soft groan from within the layers of snow. She opened her eyes. "The snow shifts again." Halvard frowned. "Not collapse?" "Not yet," she said. "But close." He stepped beside her. "We warn the valley." Era shook her head. "Not yet. We learn the direction first." They walked slowly toward the center of the valley. Snow crunched under their boots. The crust held firm in some places and dipped in others. Halvard asked, "Where does it sink?" Era pointed toward the far northern side, near the base of the ridge. There. The ground there looked lower. Not by much, but enough that she saw a faint slope that did not exist the day before. Halvard studied it. A hollow under the crust. Era stepped closer. Halvard followed. They moved slow, with space between each step. The crust sank slightly under her weight, but she kept her balance. When they reached the low area, Era knelt. She pressed her glove into the surface. It dipped, deep. She looked at Halvard. Something melted under the snow. The storm trapped heat under layers. He considered this. So, the snow collapsed in the middle. She nodded. A pocket formed. It spreads. He looked back toward the longhouses. "If it reaches the center of the valley," Ira said, "homes suffer, people fall through." Halvard clenched his jaw. "We need support beams." Era nodded. "Yes, we lay planks between homes. People walk on those." He drew a breath. "We cut them today." They returned to the longhouse. The older couple looked up when they entered. The older man asked, "Bad news?" Era answered. "The snow weakens," Halvard added. "We lay support paths. No one walks the open valley alone." The older woman nodded slowly. "We help how we can." Halvard grabbed his axe. Era wrapped warm stones in cloth and placed them in their pockets. Halvard opened the door again. "We talked to the others." They moved through the valley, knocking on doors. Neighbors gathered outside, wrapped in cloaks, rubbing their hands to keep heat in their fingers. Era addressed them. "The snow drops under us. We do not walk freely now." Halvard pointed toward the low area. "The ground there hollowed out. A deep layer shifts. We lay planks." The fisherman looked worried. "So the valley floor weakens?" Era nodded. "Slowly, but enough to break under weight." Sigrid wrapped a blanket around her shoulders. "What do we do?" Halvard answered. "We work together. We cut boards from fallen trunks. We lay them between homes. We walk on wood, not snow." The neighbors exchanged looks. Fear lingered, but not panic. People trusted Ira and Halvard now. Winter taught them to listen when this couple spoke. Era said, "Move slow, move steady. If you hear cracking, step back at once." Halvard added, "No running, Running breaks the crust. They divided tasks. Halvard and two others went to the forest to gather long trunks for planks. Era led a group to dig shallow channels in the snow so the planks could settle evenly. She moved slow, steady, always listening. The snow groaned beneath them, a deep sound, a warning. Era stood upright. "Stop!" Everyone froze. Another crack broke the air, sharper this time, closer. The sound echoed under the surface like ice splitting on a lake. Halvard heard it from the forest. He came rushing toward them, but Era lifted a hand in the air. "Slow!" she called. "Slow steps!" Halvard slowed his pace. He approached with careful footing. Ira pointed toward the northern hollow. "It drops." They watched the snow surface sink by the width of a hand. A slow, steady drop. Children stepped back. Adults held their breath. Halvard whispered, "We need ropes." Era nodded. "Tie lines between the homes." The villagers rushed to gather rope while Era and Halvard directed from the center. People tied them from post to post. Now, anyone who walked the valley held a guide in their hand. Halvard returned to the forest to cut the long trunks. He and the two men worked fast. Their axes cracked through frozen bark. Their breaths came out in freezing clouds. Their hands stiffened, but they kept swinging. Back in the valley, Ira and the villagers shoveled shallow trenches to place the planks. By midday, Halvard returned with 3 long trunks. They cut them into wide boards with axes and placed them across the trembling snow. The sound of cracking eased. The planks held. Era pressed her foot on one of them. It stayed firm. She looked at Halvard. "Good," he nodded. "We need more." They kept working through the afternoon. They cut more planks. They lay a full path between the homes on the northern side. The older children carried small boards. The younger ones fetched rope. The older couple inside Era's longhouse repaired a torn hide to help seal doors. Everyone helped. The valley moved as one. By late afternoon, the sky dimmed again. Thin clouds drifted overhead. The sun faded behind them. Era knew what this meant. "More cold," she said. Halvard wiped frost from his beard. "A hard freeze." "Yes," Era said. "The hollow sets tonight." Halvard looked at the low area. "Good, it stops sinking." Era paused, listening again. "If the freeze sets clean," he turned to her. "It might not?" She shook her head. "Sometimes the hollow refreezes in layers. Weak layers." Halvard frowned. "So tomorrow remains dangerous," her voice softened. "Yes." He touched her shoulder. "We keep working." They continued until darkness fell. As night came, torches lit the valley paths. The long planks glowed in flickering light. The snow beneath them stayed silent. People walked carefully between homes, holding rope lines, stepping only on the planks. By the time Era and Halvard returned to their longhouse, both looked drained. Their hands shook from cold and effort. Their legs trembled from hours of slow movement. Inside, the fire burned strong. The older couple warmed stones for them. Era accepted hers with a soft nod. Halvard sat on the bench and leaned forward, breathing slow, deep, controlled breaths. After a moment, he looked at Era. "You heard the first crack before anyone." She met his gaze. "Winter speaks. You listen too." He nodded. "I listen because you taught me." She smiled softly. "We learned from each other." The older woman spoke from her place by the fire. "You saved the valley today." Era shook her head. "The valley saved itself. We guided." Halvard rested his arm along the bench. "Tomorrow we reinforce the planks, then dig channels for meltwater. When the next freeze breaks, the snow moves again." Era nodded. We guide the change. Night pressed against the longhouse walls. The cold deepened. The valley rested under its shifting, dangerous crust. Era stood and opened the door a crack. She listened again. The valley stayed silent. No new cracks, no sinking. She closed the door, slowly. Halvard watched her. Safe? For now, she said. He reached for her hand. Sit with me. She sat beside him. They leaned against the bench together. The fire warmed their legs. The older couple slept. Era rested her head lightly on Halvard's shoulder. His warmth eased the long, cold hours in her bones. He spoke in a soft voice. The winter weakens. She listened to the quiet. The winter waits. He nodded. But we stand. Yes, she whispered. We stand. They fell asleep beside the fire, leaning into each other. Their bodies shared warmth, their breaths steadied. Outside, the valley froze again. The hollow held. Morning would bring the next test. But the couple who endured the longest winter in history would endure that one too. You reach the end of this long winter story. You followed Ira and Halvard through storms, hunger, danger, and silence. You watch them listen to the land. You watch them guide their people. You watch them stand together through a winter no one forgot. Their strength lives in old stories. Their calm lives in the memory of the valley they protected. Before you go, take one slow breath. Let your shoulders ease. Let the story fade in a warm way. If you want more Viking stories, I will bring another one soon. The next video follows a wanderer who crossed frozen seas alone. His path shaped a whole coast. His name still echoes in lost ports. I also placed a small free gift for you in the next upload, a soft background track inspired by winter fires. You can play it while you rest or while you listen to other stories. Thank you for staying until the last moment. I will see you in the next story.